Laces to braces, chalk to chalk, everything close and most things that aren't. Welcome back to Unlock Mental Performance, Physical Results. I'm Coach Eric, and today we're talking about your zone. Now, it's going to sound like I'm only really talking about baseball and softball and the other sports that have a strike zone, but I'm not. This is applicable to all sports, and in fact, it's applicable to life in general. What we're talking about is perceived zone versus functional zone. So let's talk about golf real quick. I don't golf, but a golf bag full of clubs, each one with a different number or name that tells you the kind of angle it hits at, the kind of distance it hits at, is a great example for what we're talking about here. So you're sitting 100 yards out from the green. Now, the manufacturer is going to tell you you want to swing a pitching wedge. But if you know you can't hit a pitching wedge 100 yards and you need to go down, get a 9, get an 8, get a 7 to get 100 yards, should you swing a pitching wedge because that's what it's supposed to be? Or should you swing the 8 because that's what's going to get you there? That's what we're talking about. Basketball players. Everybody knows a layup's easier to shoot than a three-pointer. But if your range is three-pointers and you're 5'4" and you're in high school, maybe going in for layups doesn't work so well for you. Or maybe all the rage is three-pointers, but you don't have three-point range, but you're a mid-range monster. So maybe 10 to 15 feet out is your sweet spot. So do you hammer three-pointer after three-pointer after three-pointer and find yourself on the bench? Or do you step into the elbow and take care of business? That's what we're talking about here. So when I say laces to braces, I'm talking about shoestrings to your teeth. When I'm talking about chalk to chalk, I'm talking about the batter's box. And I realize most batter's boxes aren't drawn in anymore. But chalk line to chalk line, that space outside of the plate that so many umpires like to call a strike. So if you're standing in, you've got 2 strikes on you. And that ball is consistently being called a strike, 2 balls off the plate, 3 balls below your knees, and you watch it for strike 3, are you right or are you wrong? Well, it is a strike because the umpire called it a strike, but it's not a strike because it was out of the zone. And you know it was out of the zone, and you're absolutely right. We can go back and watch the video. That ball was out of the zone. But I've been watching MLB this week, and they're calling the strikes out of the zone. So the strike zone is your perception of where you're supposed to swing. It's that nice, perfect rectangle between your knees and the top of the zone where you know the umpire is going to, and yet when the umpire zone expands, or if you're in a lower level where it's really, really inconsistent, and let's face it, guys, if the MLB umpires are in that 90 to 98% right range, you can't expect guys who are doing your 7th grade game to be that adequate or that accurate or that experienced or that excellent. So they're going to be making mistakes. And the standard is different for them. They're trained to expand that zone to make the flow of the game resemble the flow of a big league game where guys are moving along, they're swinging, they're hitting, they're striking out. You don't want 30 walks a game. That's why the strike zone for JV is a little bit looser than the strike zone for varsity. So then what are we talking about? Well, listen, I get it. We've all been frustrated. The moving zone. So how can you as an athlete, how can you as a person tackle the perceived zone if it's not always going to be the answer? Well, in baseball and in softball, we talk about your hitting zone. Your hitting zone is the space where you can put the bat on the ball consistently and put it in play. At the very worst, it's where you can foul it off and stay alive. And that hitting zone better be bigger than the strike zone so that you know when your back is against the wall and you've got 2 strikes that you're not going to be standing there watching a ball you could have put in play, that you could have chipped off, that you could have hit because it was out of the strike zone. Stop worrying about what is the perceived limits of where that ball can be hit. Stop worrying about what is the perceived best place to shoot the ball. Stop worrying about what is perceived to be the club you have to use. And look at yourself and say, okay, this is my action zone. This is where I can be effective. and you need to attack that zone. You need to master that zone. You need to have the confidence to know this is where I can survive. This is where I can be good. This is where I can thrive. This is where my greatness begins. Not here, not in this little box, but I can go here and I can go here and I can read outside the lines and I can protect what I need to protect. And when it comes down to that last second shot, I know from 15 feet out, I'm reliable. Know your zones. Don't get caught up in the black and white. Sports are way, way more gray than that. Be great. Know how great you can be and attack your hitting zone. I'm Coach Eric. This has been Unlocked Mental Performance, Physical Results. Keep grinding.